I'd like to welcome our Technical Director, Strategic Learning, Collins Marita, to just shed more light on the work that Mexico Agrifin has been doing with our partners, and even as we collect data, what we've been looking at. So without much ado, Collins, welcome.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Greetings based on where you are in this part of the world. I'd like to first thank you for joining us today for this important conversation on rethinking impact, the new trends shaping AgTech scale-up success. I'm delighted to welcome you. I know we have AgTech founders, funders, and investors, researchers, ecosystem builders, and fellow income practitioners from the region. At Mexico Agrifin, we work extensively with digital culture innovators, financial service providers, and market actors across sub-Saharan Africa. Over the last decade, we have seen remarkable growth in AgTech solutions, from digital advisory platforms and input marketplaces to embedded finance and climate-smart innovations that aim to improve productivity, resilience, and income for smallholder farmers. Yet, despite this growth, we continue to face persistent challenge. We still lack comparable decision-useful evidence on what actually works for whom and what scale. Often, impact measurement has become something that most of us, and I stand to be corrected on this, do for compliance rather than something we do for learning and better decision making. Data is collected because it is required by a donor or investor, then reported, archived, and rarely revisited. Innovators feel like that the impact measurement is a cost center rather than a strategic asset that they can be using. Today's webinar, it's about trying to change that narrative and try to see why we can do things better and reframe our thinking on impact measurement. First, for innovators, good impact data would help you to understand how your product is performing in real framing context. It helps you improve your service design, refine your value proposition, and make smarter scaling decisions. For funders and investors, credible, transparent evidence will build confidence. It supports better capital allocation, reduces perceived risk, and helps shift investment towards solutions that are both commercially viable and developmentally meaningful. The ecosystem, we see these shared frameworks and common metrics will allow us to move beyond isolated success stories and towards more coordinated and evidence-driven digital cash flow sector. This is why, as Mexico Agrifin and through our partnerships with different organizations, including Brighter, we have increasingly focused on not just measuring impact, but on building cultures of data use and learning across our portfolios. And this, we hope, will lead to or build one of the key lessons that we have learned is that impact measurement should not just be extractive. If AgTechs or partners feel like data is taken from them, but never returned in a meaningful way, the trust sort of erodes and data quality also follows, or data intensity collection also declines. We need to design impact measurement systems that generate value for the organizations collecting the data, produce insights that inform strategy and adaptation, and enable comparability without forcing one size fits all approaches. This is not easy work. It requires certain trade-offs that we have to make, and it requires collaboration, it requires willingness, and it requires, most importantly, honesty. Because we will always need to get data, and that data is to be shared amongst us. And some of the solutions we have developed also need or lead towards self-reporting. So why are we having this conversation now? The timing of this discussion is particularly important as we are seeing growing pressure on AgTechs to demonstrate impact while remaining commercially sustainable. At the same time, funders and investors are asking for stronger evidence, more rigor, and clearer outcome pathways, often with fewer resources available for measurement. Meanwhile, new tools, new frameworks, and new data sources are emerging, creating opportunities to reduce measurement burden and improve comparability, strengthening the learning if we use them as they're supposed to do. The webinar hosted today together or under AgBiz is an opportunity to surface some of these trends reflect honestly on what is changing, and spotlight practical approaches that are already working. So today, I would want us to bring our presence and thoughts together to be able to generate insights on what can work well on portfolio level impact measurement, or how gated data can support better strategic decisions, how we can develop a practical, or how we can look at what you've developed as AgBase, which is an impact measurement toolkit, and help it to be useful for the AgTechs it has envisioned to be used for, and ecosystem actors, and how we can help them collect data more effectively. And last, we would like you to reflect with us, as you as industry leaders, on the challenges and opportunities for measuring impact and while scaling. I would encourage you to engage actively, listen critically, ask questions, and think about how the ideas we are sharing today apply to your own work. As a closing thought, I would like you to think through this. If we want digital agricultural ecosystem that truly delivers for smallholder farmers, then impact measurement cannot sit at the margins of our work. It must be at the center, informing decisions, shaping incentives, and guiding capital allocation. Today is not about having all the answers. It's about asking the right questions, sharing what we are learning, and committing to doing what impact measurement more differently, better, and together. So thank you for joining us, and I look forward to the discussion. What to you, Michelle?
Thank you, Collins. I like what you said. It's not about extractive, just seeking data. It's not about that. It's also about understanding when we're seeking this data from organizations, are we able also to present it in a way that is also beneficial for them? Now, on to our next conversation. I'd like to call upon Lydia, who is our Merrill manager. She's going to be shedding light on impact measurement at the portfolio level. I think Collins has spoken to collecting it at even as the AgTech, but what about the portfolio level and even possibly so the ecosystem? Lydia, over to you.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you, Collins, for providing that overview. For me, I think I'll start with looking at or asking us in the room, do we know the different approaches that we use to measure impact? And how do you decide or select which approach is best to use when you're measuring impact? So as Agrifin, hope my presentation is visible. As Agrifin, or at a portfolio level, there are different approaches that can be used to measure impact. And those approaches vary depending on various factors. There's the aspect of considering the program design, the implementation strategies that are used for that program, the focus areas that are involved in the program. Is it in agriculture? Is it in health, education, natural resource management, or whatever area that the program focuses on? There's a consideration which is also quite key, is the target end users of the program interventions and the intended outcomes. And most definitely is looking at the duration of the program and the financial resources that are available to be able to measure impact. Because based on the financial resources and all these factors, it can be as a lean impact assessment, or it can be as detailed as, for example, a randomized controlled trial, the RCT, or it could be a quasi-experimental impact measurement, or other approaches in between. Ideally, when we measure impact, the best scenario is that having a baseline data where you can measure changes of the outcomes against once a program has been implemented. There's also the aspect of the baseline helps in strengthening the validity and credibility of some of the impact insights that you get, because you're measuring it against how the status quo was before the intervention were implemented. But also baseline data helps us to analyze the heterogeneous effect of all these things that are involved in between. But what if you don't have baseline data? Then what happens? What approaches will you be able to use? That's how us as the AgriFin, how it was or how it is. The AgriFin portfolio is quite complex. So to begin with, we didn't have baseline data because we were transitioning from a phase 1 to a phase 2, where we already had data, and we were scaling these activities that we already had. And we're working with over 150 partners, reached about 8 million smallholder farmers across 5 countries that we operate in or we support farmers in. That is Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Ethiopia, and Nigeria. Based on the portfolio, various digital information and financial services were designed, tested, and scaled to the small scaleholder farmers using a mix of different dissemination approaches, from USSD to IVR to WhatsApp chatbot to even using the agents network to ensure that all these activities or the services are scaled and farmers are able to access them and meaningfully use them. We also had another layer of farmers who are at different, the partners were at different maturity levels in terms of their business models. There are those that were already moving to the scaling and sustainability stage, but there are those that had just finalized piloting some activities and they were moving to the aspect of scaling. And all these, the engagements or the products and services took various durations to be reached out to farmers. There are those that took 3 months, there are those that literally took multi-year, and there are those that we had to do various iterations and phases to be able to implement to the farmers. So considering all these complexities, it was certain and clear that a linear approach will not be feasible to use to conduct an impact evaluation. So in partnership with ID Insight, we developed a framework that included 3 complementary components, where all those components were interlinked to ensure that they are able to form a causal linkage to the program's theory of change, of ensuring that in the long run, we increase the productivity, the income, and the resilience of farmers through the digital products and services that we offer to them. The key components included contribution, where we looked at assessing the impact of the portfolio's technical assistance to the partner level impact in terms of their outcomes, their outputs, and the business models. We also looked at another factor, which is the breadth, which we measured in terms of the reach, the farmers' reach in terms of the services, the digital products and services that they received, and how depth or how meaningful they engaged with those products and services. So we just didn't look at in terms of the access and reach, but did it translate to meaningful usage and depth in terms of whatever they received. Then the last aspect we also looked at is the depth. This is where we looked at going further and not just looking at the services that farmers got and their usage, but also looking at now the farmer level impact per farmer, where we did all these comparison. So just to provide an overview of the methodology. So as mentioned, the contribution aspect to look at impact at partner level, and where we looked at how all these technical assistance translated and impacted the partner's outputs and outcomes. And we assessed that through qualitative, informed interviews with the partner representatives and our engagement leads, who we usually call them technical leads. And after the information and the insights was obtained, data collected and analyzed, to ensure that we also translated that with a set of program documents in terms of reports, in terms of the observations that the partners also made when they're interacting with our leads. The second aspect in terms of the breadth, we're looking at the number of farmers who had access, who used and meaningfully engaged with the products and services that were provided. So ideally, we looked at a kind of 4-stage funnel where we looked at how many farmers accessed the services. After accessing, how many farmers did enroll to receive and use the services, where we call direct enrollment. And after that, how many actively used in the last 3 or 6 months prior to data being collected. And after that, after the usage and the active usage, did it translate to any meaningful use in terms of them applying the knowledge and the services to their farming practices? That was done through farmer surveys, looking at those farmers that were supported by the program and then comparing with the farmers that were not supported by the program. Then at the depth level, we looked at the impact of similar products and what the literature is saying out there. So we did kind of weight what we got after supporting the farmers, what the data said, and looking at what the literature or what other programs and what other data says that is beyond now our program level. So we looked at weighting in terms of the precision estimate and relevance of the study to the partners that we worked with in terms of the context, the different countries, of course, the modes of delivery, and all the other factors and nuances that are part of it. After looking at it, of course, we also had to do a meaningful aspect of impact evaluation, where we picked a selected few farmers depending on the services they were offering to the farmers, and comparing that with what other farmers are receiving as a control group also. So we looked at the national farmer registries across the various countries to be able to now compare in terms of each product that the farmer provides and what the national registry farmers within the national registry, how they fare on, and how we can compare and do that. So that we did using a propensity score matching, where we compared the farmers within the program and those that are not within the program. So this is an overview of the methodology that you can use when you have a complex program or portfolio where having a linear approach is not really feasible. So some of our key takeaways from this story is that for qualitative data, and especially where we have lots of contextual differences and a lot of nuances to consider, it's recommended at least we collect 2 rounds of data collection to ensure that the outcomes that are time-bound, that cannot be measured within a short time, can be measured. Also have a better defined comparison group, just to ensure that they are similar to the treated group as much as possible, because that literally eliminates any questionable data that you might have or insights. For the contribution components, it's literally better for example, the partners to be within the same level of maturity as much as possible when looking at their business models, their scaling strategies, and all that. And of the key factor is that ensuring that you control for the contextual factors as much as possible during the design and the sampling phases. I think a parting shot from me will be, in practice, the best visible design is better than a best theoretical design, because in theory, there are very many designs that are actually perfect, but are they really feasible? So this is where we have to literally have a trade in. Should we go for the best theory or the one theoretical design, or a best feasible design? From my desk and from me, I think a best feasible design is better. Thank you, and over to you, Michelle.
Thank you, Lydia. That was very, very insightful. I mean, just talking about even localizing the research and being able to make sure that it's not a one size fits all. It's being able to collect different sets of data. And I like the fact that you've also spoken to measuring, like being able to collect tangible data, which now leads us into our next conversation. I'd like to call upon Rita Sete to talk more about the AgBase toolkit and also more about AgBase, which is our platform. But Rita, I don't want to steal the words from you. Over to you.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm going to be taking you through what we've done on the AgBase program regarding impact measurement. So AgBase is both a program and a platform within Mexico Agrifin, hosting the program, and Brighter Bridges hosting the platform. So 2 or 3 years ago, we started the AgBase platform, and when we were doing the ideation, we acknowledged the fact that impact measurement plays a big role in the AgTech sector and in shaping investments. So one of the things that we embarked on was to look at the ecosystem just to see a high-level analysis of the state of impact measurement in the ecosystem. And one of the things that came up from that research is that impact measurement is highly fragmented. And this is because most funders and innovators use different indicators to gauge performance of their innovations at the user, client, or farmer level. And impact measure data collection is very minimal, with a majority of the people collecting a very small data set of data that is comparable to other people in the ecosystem. However, impact measurement is still very relevant to the scaling of AgTech technologies at the rural ecosystem. And one of the uses of impact data is that it's used to refine the offerings and the user experience, and also to drive product growth. And at the funder level, the impact data that is collected by early stage funders is often what is used to make investment decisions where data at enterprise level is not available. So some of the things that we've observed during the course of our program is that, as Collins had alluded to it, that impact data is collected just as an accountability to our various grant reporting requirements, and less as a tool for reflection and adaptation and learning. And there is also very limited standardization, and actors are using different tools, different frameworks, different timelines of collecting data, with limited aggregation for ecosystem visibility. There's also a missed opportunity for learning because data is still siloed at different organizational databases, either at innovator level or at funder level, and accelerators, incubators, and very little of this data is shared. And emphasis still remains at output level indicators. This includes gender, productivity, employment, and there are still existing barriers to meaningful reporting, where the innovators may not have the technical capacity to measure impact robustly to levels that are required by researchers. And due to this, AgBase embarked on an exercise to attempt to standardize impact metrics. And we arrived at near standardized taxonomy and just collating data that is common, where data is common across actors. And this is data that is often available to the innovators through their operations. So we have prioritized reach and overall performance, employment performance, customer experience, and impact on livelihoods, which are the two. Customer experience and impact on livelihoods often requires survey data. So what does impact reporting on AgBase look like? As I've mentioned, it emphasizes two broad categories: operational metrics and core metrics, with operational metrics covering the profile of the company. So who is the clientele? How many women and youth farmers are they reaching? And the gross revenue. Employment, how is this organization structured? This covers the number of employees, gender composition of employees, and the gender of C-suite executives. The other two, customer experience and impact, covers survey data. And to that, we have developed a toolkit that helps innovators to see how the clients perceive their services by using the Net Promoter Score and the challenge rate. And for impact, we prioritize quality of life and change in total production or yield and earnings and their drivers. So the AgBiz Impact Toolkit provides you with an approach to collect data. And this is to offer a very straightforward approach for impact measurement that is affordable and easily accessible to innovators. So we are recommending phone-based surveys. We also support through the toolkit, the users are able to see how to go about sampling and segmenting the target groups and how to train the enumerators on improving the data quality. The tool is very simple to use and can be easily executed at the innovator level. So to cover the two tracks for feedback that requires surveys from the farmer level, we provide a user guide that provides you with a step-by-step guide on how to go about data collection, data analysis, and reporting, with everything being embedded in the tool, leaving very little to be figured out, especially for smaller companies that are just starting off and do not have the resources to engage research firms. However, we did partner with 60 Decibels to borrow from their metrics, which is we found to be a standard framework that was used by most funders in the ecosystem. So the just to provide a high level description on the metrics that we cover under the survey, the Net Promoter Score is a common gauge that is used as a proxy to understand loyalty and satisfaction. It's a scale that is scored from 0 to 10, where the farmer is asked whether they are likely to recommend a service from an innovator or not, where 10 is more likely and 0 is least likely. The challenge rate and is just ask the farmers to describe whether they've had challenges with the service. That's a yes or a no answer. The two first metrics have been really helpful from what we have tested with companies in providing in surfacing out the friction points that people have with the company, and which can be used to integrate into the feedback can be used to integrate to the operations, improving outcomes at user level, and also in most areas where this feedback had not been collected and was resulting in drop-offs, it can improve stickiness. The other three is quality of life, change in production, and change in money. And this captures the perception of how farmers are perceiving the change in the respective, in their livelihood, in their production, and their income. So after the data collection is complete, what then do the innovators do with the data? As mentioned earlier, we have a platform called AgBiz that aggregates and showcases the performance of agri-food companies in emerging markets. So we are encouraging self-reporting of data where it's available, and where it's not available, we are open at the moment to supporting a partnership to measure impact. The self-reported data is used to contribute to intelligence outputs and reports that are currently being produced within the program, and also it provides consistent and structured data that helps innovators stand out to investors, donors, and people who are seeking partnerships in the ecosystem. The QR code can be scanned and it will be shared with you after the webinar. And this is a sample of the report that we are the first series of what we are calling the Seeds of Impact. It's a directory of food companies who've self-reported their data on AgBiz. At the moment, we have data of 40 plus companies, and we are looking to increase this through self-reporting. That's the end of my presentation. Stay in touch and sign up to the AgBiz platform using the QR code that is sharing on your screen. Thank you. Back to you, Michelle.
Thank you, Rita. I'm curious to find out how many of the participants have reported themselves on, like, been able to report their impact on the Agri's Toolkit. Maybe you can show by show of hands, but if you haven't, please just scan that QR code. Oh, Almut, you have. Great. So thank you so much. So if you haven't, please do make sure to just sign up, scan the QR code, and you'll be able to get assistance. And even after the webinar, we shall be sending an email and you can touch base with us. Thank you for setting that context, Rita. And now on to our next discussion. So thank you so much for shedding light onto our next discussion. We have talked about impact measurement, portfolio level. We've talked about measuring impact at the portfolio level. Is the impact data standardized? Are we able to compare it? And to bring this discussion, and to expound on it, I am joined by some amazing panelists. So maybe I can just introduce them. We have Sheena Raikundalia. She's the Chief Growth Officer at Kuza One. She'll be sharing more about her experience and also Kuza One's experience using impact measurement tools. And then we have David Saunders, Director of Strategy and Growth at Brighter. We have Ashley Gasperi, Marketing Director at Fresh Crop Limited. We also have Enos Masindwe, Country Director at UK Kenya Tech Hub. So I'll start off with Sheena Raikundalia. Hi, Sheena.
Hi, can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can see you. Yes, we can see
Perfect. Great. Hi, everyone.
you. Hi. So, Sheena, it's good to have you on this call. And I know we've been in the ecosystem together. And I just want you to just talk, please introduce yourself and the work you do at Kuza One. And also tell us, maybe, many ag techs are under pressure to demonstrate impacts while remaining commercially viable. How do you balance social impact goals with business sustainability? What's the trade-off? Over to you.
No, great question, and I'm glad you asked it, but I'll do a quick intro. Hi, my name is Sheena Raikundalia, and it's very funny because my previous role, I was the country director for the UK Kenya Tech Hub, and you have Enos, who kind of replaced me, is also on this call, so that's very exciting. But I have a very mixed background. I used to be a lawyer in London for 10 years, then I moved back home to Kenya, about 12 years ago now. I'm a failed entrepreneur, so I know what it feels like to kind of fail at something, and I'll say I learned more from my failure than I did in my entire career as a lawyer and MBA combined. And I always say this, we need to celebrate failure more. And then I moved to the world of impact investing, so have that kind of background. And then I was, as I said, with the UK government. And then I made the choice and I've moved to kind of operator, which is at Kuza Biashara, which is an AgTech. And just to give you an idea, we've operated in over 9 countries, but Kenya is our base, where we have about 600,000 farmers whom we serve through people, though. We don't just believe in technology. For us, it's people plus platform. And our young people are the link that connect the farmers via our digital platform to advisory, finance, and other service providers like markets, inputs, etc. So yeah, I can go on to the question, and I think it's a great question and one that doesn't really, the trade-off is real. And from Kuza's perspective, Kuza is a B Corp. So what that means is you're certified in the US basically, but that means is we believe in business as a force of good. Too many times we think business one thing, impact the other thing, but actually business can be a force of good. And for us, we've been, I think, world's best B Corp for about 3 times in a row. So for us, the impact is not just about, I think what Collins was mentioning, the tick box, that's part of our DNA. It's exactly what we signed up to. We believe in business as a force for good. And this is where you might feel a bit annoyed for putting me first and asking me this question, because as people know me, I'm an extremely blunt person. And I'm going to say that actually, I do think that I do think we talk about the importance of measurement, and I think it is very, very important. However, with the way the impact measurement industry is shaped as of now, I mean, it's a 8 billion industry, and it's anticipated like a 300% increase by 2030. I'm like, are we actually measuring what matters, right? So I think there's this quote of Einstein, and I use it a lot, which says, not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted. And I think the way impact measurement right now is it's too busy. It's easier to count the things that are easy to count, right? Numbers of trained people attending this webinar, people doing this. And if I look through like all the theory of changes and everything, I see, 5 million and impact reports, which I see 5 million people trained, 10 million farmers reached, $400 million mobilized. And I think, wow, we must have solved poverty in Africa. Like if I read that, I would have think that we've solved it all. So I think we do as an industry need to ask ourselves the hard questions. And I think those questions are being discussed right now. So do I think impact measurement should not be done? No, as I said, at Kuza, we're a B Corp, we believe in the heart of it. And I think it makes business sense. If you can increase the incomes of your customers, whether it's your farmers, whoever they are, that means they're more able to buy your services. So it actually makes business sense for everyone to do good, make sure people earn money, whether they're young people, farmers, etc., because that's how they'll be able to spend money. If they spend money, they'll buy your goods, so your business will grow. It's a positive cycle. So I think we need to stop selling it as just, it's to do good. No, it makes business sense. It's to do well, number one. The second thing is that Kuza, we've taken a little bit of a shift now in how we measure impact. And we've said, actually, the current impact measurement standards, they're too focused on, my impact. You attribute your impact to yourself. Because of my intervention as Kuza, 100,000 farmers have increased their incomes. But in the same year, if a pest comes or rain happens, then they haven't. So I think that unfortunately, the way the system is designed is we have to attribute our impact. And to do that, so we can get more funding, we can get more attention, we can do this. But the reality is these are really complex problems to solve, right? Wicked problems, complex problems. So it can't be about impact attribution, but contribution. So it's not me as Kuza who did it, but what did I enable? What did the ecosystem do? And once we start enabling that, then I think we can have real impact rather than, my intervention did this. In complex, one intervention cannot do it. That's why I'm really sometimes vocal against RCTs. I don't think it's possible. So at Kuza, what are we measuring? We're measuring the 3 S's. We're saying speed, scale, and sustainability. So can we do our interventions at speed? Can we do them at scale? And how do we make them sustain? And the way to make them sustain is actually, we have to take out our ego, logo out of the conversation, right? Create an enabling environment where other people can create their own impact and can scale. It's not about being attributed to us. Like our agripreneurs will create that impact. We will help them, but that's how we do it. I think otherwise it can't be done. So I bet you're regretting asking me first, but I'll stop there.
No, I like it. Thank you so much, Sheena. I think you are shedding a lot of light into this perspective, because I think there's always that question, are we reporting impact data for funding? Because there's that. But then I like the way you said it. If I'm able to report the impact of what this startup has done and how it's affected the ecosystem, then we're able to grow collectively. And not only that, the farmer, if their livelihood is improved and how they're able to use the solution is improved, they're able to come back to it. I like it. Thank you so much. Now my next question goes to Ashley Gaspari, Marketing Director at Fresh Crop. Hi, Ashley. How are you doing?
Hi.
Hi.
Doing well.
It's good to have you on this call. So I'd like to kindly request if you could introduce yourself, tell us a bit about Fresh Crop, and then maybe I can throw in my question. Fresh Crop has partnered with different organizations on various capacities, including impact measurement. You've also used the AgBase impact measurement toolkit you've been able to report. What data points have been important in improving your services?
Thank you so much, Michelle. Nice to meet everyone. My name is Ashley Gaspari. I'm one of the directors at Fresh Crop Limited. For those of you that don't know, Fresh Crop is a fully integrated potato value chain based in Kenya. We operate as a one-stop shop for farmers, producing our own certified seeds, bundling them with high-quality inputs, training, extension services, and then linking them to offtake in our own industrial processing facility that makes French fries and other potato products. Effectively bridging the gap all the way from tissue culture of potatoes all the way through consumption. We have primary production units for seeds in 4 counties, and we offer services and have farmers in 10 counties, over 10,000 farmers. So that's us in a nutshell. So I'd like to address your question and tell you the data points that have been important in improving our services. I think, and I'm going to speak specifically about using the ag-based toolkit and the data points that were really helpful to us. So impact on livelihoods was number one. I know in there we kind of had bundled in the yield and production, income, quality of life, but we were able to validate with the ag-based toolkit some of what we've been able to replicate on our own farms is also extending to our farmer networks. So it was really important for us to see the production farmers that were reporting improvement, from 4 to over 9 tons per acre, and seeing how that directly translated into improved livelihoods and income. This can help us also revamp our training programs if necessary. There was insights that came out through that. So that was one of the important ones. And then I would really like to say the customer challenges, I think was very eye-opening for us as a company. We do kind of collect these challenges individually, but to do them at scale with our customers, we were able to get feedback. So some of the biggest challenges we noted were waiting times and booking delays, as well as technology hurdles. So we were able to take the data from the survey and translate it into action. I know Collins mentioned in his intro about guiding capital allocation. So one of the things that came out very clearly is our demand for certified seed far outweighs our production. And it kind of validated the capital allocation towards expanding our seed production sites and expanding our acreage, which we've been able to almost double our acreage coming into the ending of this year into next year, which will help kind of bridge that gap. And then we were also able to identify when we do pre-sales of our seeds too far in advance, it causes a longer wait time for farmers till their order is fulfilled. So we actually narrowed that gap and kind of went from taking a booking anytime to saying we're only taking bookings less than a month before harvest, because we know we're able to service the farmers quicker. So those were kind of some insights that we were able to translate and use. So I would say the data we've been used to improve our services and operationally, not just only to have a nice kind of snapshot for potential investors or for grant purposes. Like, we purely did this for internal purposes, and it was a good experience.
Thank you, Ashley. I love that. I think the fact that you're speaking to, I think what we've been campaigning for and championing for more agri-fintechs to report their impact data. And it's also nice just to hear perspective that it's been able to help you improve processes and also just improve on production. And that is, I think that's even the core purpose of this webinar. Now, I want to switch over to Sheena. Sheena, you did mention that it's business for good, right? But I'd still like to ask in that, even in that thought process, what are the biggest barriers that you experience when you were measuring impact, and what are the biggest barriers preventing organizations from sharing impact data, and how can the ecosystem build more trust around data use and transparency?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So to give you an example, like we work with a lot of people, a lot of partners, but for the farmers, it's us, right? So every time we get survey requests from different organizations, so we've done independent evaluations, independent reports. I'd say I have at least 6 that we've done, right? But each time that's happened, each of those 6 organizations have gone and spoken to farmers. And yes, we try and get different subsets, we try and do this, but all the time the farmers are kind of like, but didn't we just speak to you? Like, why are you asking us the same thing again? Right. But yet everybody, and again, it goes back to, because people want to, maybe they want to learn different things. So for example, one person wanted to learn about agripreneurs and youth income. One person wanted to learn about climate smart, or all of these things, which makes so different. But to a farmer, it's like, why do you keep asking me all of these same questions? And sometimes also the farmer is always thinking, or the agripreneur is thinking, but why are they asking me? What should I say, rather than the reality on the ground, right? So sometimes I feel like these surveys and these things are just kind of like a self-serving like a self-serving exercise, to be honest, because sometimes the farmer or the agripreneur, they don't want to get people in trouble. So once I remember getting a call saying, oh, but what should I say? I don't want to get you into trouble. I'm like, no, just say whatever. There's no trouble. Like what you don't know, what you didn't learn is a good thing. That's also a learning. So also people have that, right? Especially the females, they don't want to. So sometimes they'll say things. And then I've seen the opposite. I've had a group of youth agripreneurs that I was in a WhatsApp group with. I think they didn't know I was in that WhatsApp group. And they were like, oh, maybe then we'll get more funding, or maybe somebody will think that we're. So again, I just think that I think what we're doing is just, sometimes I feel like it's just not grounded on reality. Sometimes it is, don't get me wrong. But sometimes I think over and over again with these donor programs, it's exactly that, right? And then I think, so then the secondly is like, yeah, you keep asking the same questions. They keep asking you over and over again. So people get frustrated, they kind of lose trust in the process. And thirdly, is a lot of the times they're also sort of like, well, why, why is that, what is this for? So I remember, I'll give you a real example. One of our agripreneurs went up, because our model is we work with agripreneurs, youth that we've trained, and then we connect them to farmers. So the farmers were doing, I think it was tomato, so, I think, no, they were doing maize, it was maize training. And so the agripreneur was saying, yeah, this is the maize training. And as he opened his device, we have 42 value chains. So there's poultry. So the farmer was like, oh, what about poultry? Can you, teach us about poultry? And they're like, but no, why do you care about poultry? You said you have, you're a maize farmer. And he goes, oh, yeah. But my wife, she does poultry. In 3, 4, 5 visits, actually, the maize farmer was not just a maize farmer. They had poultry, they had beans, they had all of this. So I also sometimes think, right, and we talk about it, we're like, is this real data, or is it data just built on a house of cards, and we take it so, so I think those are the real challenges. Like, you lose trust in the people on the ground. They don't understand why. It feels extractive, and I know we've said let's try and not make it extractive. At the moment, a beautiful report, it's still extractive, right? And maybe the organization, maybe the CUSA gets a good report and we got a good NPS score and stuff, but does that translate to our trust on the ground? No, it's actually a real trust issue on the ground. And then comes the data protection. Obviously, we're DPO, we're registered, we're compliant. A lot of information that we have is quite sensitive, like people's, like their ages, where they are, where do you draw the line? So I think I get it. We need to measure and we need good data. Can we have more honest conversations about, is this the best way to do it? And one of the things we were experimenting on, we were saying, oh, look, there's AI now, right? So can we do, like, instead of doing surveys and stuff, how do you use that? And again, we're trying this model of, can we listen more rather than these structured survey questions? I don't know, but I feel like there's a lot of room for doing things differently.
Thank you, Sheena. Interesting perspective. And which now leads me to my next question. I'd like to call upon Enos Weswa from UK Kenya Tech Hub. Hi, Enos, how are you doing?
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Michelle. Yes.
Yes, how are you doing? So, Enos, in light of what Sheena has mentioned, there's a lot of data that's been collected. But even from the investment perspective, what can ecosystem actors do to ensure that impact measurement systems are not just extractive, monitoring and evaluation reporting tools, but rather tools for adaptation, learning, and better decision making? Please tell us, and also please introduce yourself and tell us a bit about UK Kenya Tech Hub. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Michelle, for that question. It's a good question. But just to introduce myself, my name is Enos Weswa. And as Sheena said, she used to occupy this role some time back, but it's a small ecosystem, as I say. So I am the country director at the UK Kenya Tech Hub at the British High Commission. Most of you know it as FCDO. So we basically support the tech entrepreneur, digital entrepreneurs as well, just sort of around 3 areas: access markets, access talent, and also access finance. And so I wear a hat here. I wear a hat of DFI, or development partner in the ecosystem. And so we are regarded as donors, others call us funders, So it's really good to be here and good to meet all of you. So on to the question you've asked about what we can do to sort of change the direction which reporting has always been gravitating towards, and that is really being extractive and all that. I think from my perspective, I feel first it's a mindset, and then it's a mindset shift, and then it is what really pushes us to be extractive. And I think a lot can be done, and a lot of is being done, really framing what are we looking in the long term. And I think Shin has mentioned about really picking on what we call sort of activity or output reporting, which is we have trained 1,000 people. We have and having all those numbers. I think there's one instance where there was one partner who mentioned we had trained 6 million, and we were asking where are the 6 million and what does that translate. So I think increasingly as development partners, we are put into task to not only talk about the output, but talk about outcome and impact. And the fact that output is easy, of course, to report because you just need to count. The other one sort of has a long-term framing, but also contributes to sustainability and contributes quite significantly on giving meaning or deeper meaning what you're doing, as opposed to sort of ticking boxes. So I think what we would sort of change would be significantly that all these grants are actually sort of are given according to some impact reporting that has been provided. And I think that has been there. It's only that I think when you look at their levels, because we have at the level of ecosystem and system strengthening, there's a lot of that. At the level of towards the end, I think Sheena and Ashley have mentioned about a lot of sort of within a startup organization, and that fuels growth. So you'll find that there's a cascading nature of this thing. So we try to put some intervention around system. Those translate to supporting individual organization at some point, and which translate to livelihood being changed. And I think that cascading nature is quite important. But I think just another thing that sort of has come out very interesting, I think, and Sheena framed it quite interesting, talking about attribution and contribution. And that's a reality that we also live in, because personally, because our approach has mostly been short term, and Sheena knows it. Others program, of course, run for a long time, and there's so much you can capture in a long-term program, and there's so much you can capture in a pilot program. So a pilot program is constrained with output and is constrained rather with outcome. That's a pilot program. And others are actually, it requires a longer time to actually measure impact. So the reality on the ground is also the nature of the programs we offer. They need also to have a way of really signaling that it's important to actually see the sort of long-term effect of what you're doing. And that will signal as really focusing on what matters, which is the outcome and the impact. So for attribution and contribution, I like the word contribution because everyone wants to take credit of a startup. And you can imagine when it comes to a startup, it goes through a long funnel, and this funnel has pockets of contribution or pockets of intervention. So you can't just say I was able to scale Twigger Food. as the UK, because they were in your accelerator program, and they went through hundreds of other intervention and other accelerator program that contributed to that. So I think that also underpins the fact that we, by just understanding that pipeline, will be able to sort of understand what some of the metrics that really matter, and not go for attribution, but contribution. Thank you, and over to you.
Thank you, and which now even I think a question that's coming to my mind even before I go to Ashley. Do we need more patient capital? Because I mean, if the programs are structured in a short period of time, and of course the impact is being measured, just asking. But maybe hold on to that thought. Ashley, what can ecosystem actors do to ensure that impact measurement is not just about extractive data and reporting, but how can we ensure that there's learning, adaptation, and even using the data for decision making?
Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, so I really think the emphasis on kind of reporting for funders moving towards, reporting for operational growth is super important. One of those things that was mentioned before was funders accepting self-reported data. And I know that's a big push, which we need to build that trust, and not just taking self-reported data for what it is. I mean, there can be validating reports and supporting, documentation to back that up. But I think having that standardized and accepting the self-reported data will really make that simpler for us as the private sector, all ecosystem actors. It'll make it for the funders, investors. So I think that's number one. And then I think embedding impact collection data into normal operations. So it's something that we try and do here at our company, but I think all ecosystem actors could do the same. And yes, it does take a bit more resources, but for example, the ag-based toolkit was simple enough and something that we can adopt as an organization and embed into our normal operations, with our teams to conduct it seasonally, or annually, but it's definitely something that we need to treat as a management tool versus, doing it for a donor or a funder. And then another thing is closing the feedback loop to avoid just being extractive. One of the things that's so important is to receive feedback. I mean, we've been part of some grants where they've been very heavy on data collection, and to this date, we've never seen a result of, hundreds of man hours collecting this data and even hiring people to collect this data. So closing the feedback loop instead of just being extractive. And even doing that on a small scale internally as an ecosystem actor. So when we collected this data with the ag-based toolkit, we were able to then go back and present it to all of our staff, and then also present it to our ambassadors who work with our farmer groups. And it really adds value. And just like Sheena was saying, sometimes farmers get asked the same questions over and over, and they get tired of it. But for them to actually receive the feedback and kind of see even some of the changes we were able to make because of their data, it really helped the buy-in for the farmer. So over to you, Michelle.
Thank you, Ashley. Very interesting perspective. And also I think that's a way of just being able to encourage each other to collect data. And now my next question goes to David Saunders from Brighter. Hi, David. How are you doing?
Hi, Michelle. Thanks so much.
Yes. So
doing well. Thank you.
You're doing well. Yes. David, I'd like you to kindly introduce yourself and Please, if you could just tell us, how are funders and investors changing their expectations around evidence, outcomes, and performance measurement in the ecosystem? And is the ecosystem open to self-reported data? We've talked about this with the Ag-based impact toolkit. So just please just share.
Yeah, thanks so much, Michelle, and very interesting discussion so far. My name's David Saunders. I'm the Ag-based program lead. As Michelle was mentioning, and Rita, the Ag-based program is jointly hosted with Mercy Corps, AgriFin, and Brighter. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a few kind of themes that I think are coming out of the discussion so far around, the cost of reporting, impact reporting, the value of impact reporting as well, and how, you shift from just focusing on the things that you can count to the things that can matter. And I think we're seeing kind of a similar conversation also taking place with funders as well. I think they're, very aware that having very different kind of impact measurement frameworks can create a lot of externalities on the ecosystem in terms of reporting, both for startups as well as for support organizations that assist them. So we're seeing a lot of interest from funders in terms of trying to consolidate and come up with a common set of indicators that they can deploy. I think the second thing that we're seeing, right, is trying to have closer alignment between what gets funded and what ultimately achieves impact. I think one of the biggest questions we get asked at AgBase for this topic is, is funding going to the solutions that are ultimately contributing to what matters most? And that's not just, say, private funding, but that's also, concessional funding and non-commercial funding as well. It often is quite hard given the challenges with impact data, the cost of collecting it, to have enough impact data to basically reflect the full landscape of innovations for funders to make the best and most informed decision in terms of what they support. Also, for different types of funders, they also have different mandates that shape what they can and can't invest in as well. So there may be, a really great, potentially high impact solution that's, very much at the early stage, but doesn't fit currently within the mandate of a funder that could really help that business grow. And I think the third thing that, I think is emerging from this discussion that I find quite interesting, right, is that impact data is not just something we see as a way to raise funding anymore. It's something that I think, as Ashley is reflecting, as Sheena is reflecting as well, it's also something that helps you to improve your overall offering to the market, ultimately contributing then to usage, uptake, and to your bottom line. And so I think, those three trends, right? The kind of appreciation of funders that there needs to be some type of standardization or collaboration about what we measure. I think the second point around, how do we then come up with more innovative ways to collect that data at a firm level or an ecosystem level so we can improve the visibility and the evidence that funders have to make those decisions. And then I think the third thing, which is not just necessarily seeing this impact data as something that you're using to sell yourself to funders, but actually as something that really you see as a core part of improving your old business offering, I think are three trends that they're really seeing shaping the space. I'm not saying we've solved any of those. I think the challenges that Sheena and Ashley are reflecting are very real, but I think there's a very strong appreciation from funders. In terms of this toolkit and the approach that Rita shared and we're thinking about for AgBase in terms of self-reporting, I think the jury's still out on whether or not funders really find that data valuable. Which is both a challenge that we're trying to take on, and Ashley and Fresh Crop really being a willing early participant to do this with us. But when you speak to funders, a lot of the times what they'll tell you, right, is they need to do their own due diligence. We don't, if you look at deal rooms, for example, they haven't been hugely successful in Africa in terms of helping funders do deals through deal rooms on the financial due diligence side. I think there's a similar perspective on the impact reporting side where they're ultimately going to want to do that themselves. But what I do think this data helps to do is it helps to provide, filtering for funders looking for companies. So, if I am looking at, this self-reported data, it can help me to shortlist 10 or 15 companies that I'm really then interested in so that I can do my due diligence on them myself. So I think it might not be a standalone solution to solving the challenge around increasing the visibility of impact and helping to drive funding, into the places that we want to see it most. But I think it's part of a system of better increasing the visibility of what really can matter in the ecosystem and helping to get some companies more visible that say can't afford a 60 decibel survey or other types of third-party surveys that can then help them get into that system and maybe get more in front of funders that can ultimately then pay for more advanced or more robust impact efforts in the future. So that's really how I see this kind of fitting together and where I really see this work coming in. I think, the side that Ashley was really speaking about that I really resonate with is, we wanted to design this in a way that isn't just for funders, but it's also ultimately for companies themselves. So that if, it doesn't just solve, hey, I can get in front of funders, but now I can really improve, my offering. I can really better understand what drives value for my customers, because ultimately that's going to translate into usage and revenue that's also going to attract funders as well.
Thank you, David. Well put. Well put. Now I'm going to throw the question to Enes. Enes, what outcomes in terms of impact that were funders looking at 5 years ago that they're not looking at today? And even just to come back to David's question, the self-reporting, are investors open to this? I'd like to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. And I think it was really good sort of wrapping every reflection that has been going through just the discussion. I would start with the first question, and the first question about if they would be interested. And actually, of course, translating the interest into sort of a more direct or a more decisive decision to be made around all this. I think David has picked on something quite important. The way things are moving is that order has really decreased. And given that order has decreased, the question of standardization becomes sort of a demand more than just a feel-good situation. So a lot of there's a lot of collaboration between DFI and DFIs, amongst DFIs, I mean, and those collaboration sort of will always bring about standardization and will also bring a lot of budget cuts. And so when we are looking at due diligence, sometimes actually due diligence takes a lot of time. And so there has to be some sort of credibility around sort of building any third-party due diligence, but definitely they would want to sort of pay attention to other innovative way of really doing this. There's also been, and also just you had mentioned about patient capital, there's also a lot of collaboration coming in between DFI and corporates. And of course, these are two organizations that so far have been operating quite differently. One is heavy on impact, regardless on sort of sustainability, profitability, and all that, mostly profitability. But again, for corporates and looking at corporate development, they want to play in the same space, but to them, they're also looking at profitability and other objectives. So what we are seeing increasingly is sort of a unified outcome they're all looking at, because scaling, because of the order shrinking, scaling will also, and the scaling has always been from the private sector. So those resources, I think because of this shrinking and more partnership, and I think I will quote something I saw yesterday, that we are actually investors as opposed to donors. So we want to see ourselves as equal investors, and that underpins the fact that we are all looking at the same outcome and the same sort of output. So I think it just cements the fact that we will be gravitating towards sort of a unified reporting and possibly a third-party sort of reporting. The first question, I would say, looking at there are quite a number of things that I always appreciate when dealing with a lot of DFIs. There's definitely when businesses grow, they always do good, like employ many people. They are able to sort of get more innovative solution. They deepen sort of a number of things, like if it's financial support or any of those. And of course, I think increasingly we are seeing that economics are also making sense to donors, and the question of value for money is also coming up quite often, which all this can be captured with the so-called unified and more accessible and sort of more aligned way of reporting. I don't know if I've answered all the questions, but I think for the
Yes.
first one, somehow, yes, but I'll
Yes.
stop there. Thanks.
Yes, thanks for that, Enes. I just also want to ask, even as we keep talking about impact data being important as well for investors, I'm curious to ask, and maybe the audiences, has impact evidence ever shifted your decision to approve, reject, resize, I think, and basically an investment, like a startup portfolio, like in the AgTech ecosystem?
Okay, not necessarily in the AgTech, but I think it's shifted quite a bit. And from a programming perspective or from project design, a lot has happened. And I think and I'll use just an example. We have this, we've been sort of, before we do any project, we have to really understand what are the gaps, and all this underpins that we need to have sort of some data sets that will inform our decision. And when you look at our project, we usually start from pilot and then phasing and getting. So we've actually used a lot of this pilot to sort of understand what is possible and what is not. And one of the projects that I'm aware of, I think it's first of all started with sort of linking, and I think Sheena also contributed to that, linking SMEs with banks and through a platform. And just because it was hard to think of scaling it through the same sort of support that we were giving in terms of TOTs and all that. Of course, there was the component of using an innovative way of scaling, which was brought in a very different phase. That meant we needed to use more technology. We needed to use something that looked like a digital platform that would easily scale the intervention as well. So a lot of this data, and I'll tell you, for all the projects that are done by DFIs, they need to always have a backing on what it looks in terms of impact. And then, of course, the design will sort of break that down into sort of activities and output that we can visualize and sort of budget for. So I have endless examples on when we've actually just used the impact report to either stop a project or actually what we call pivot to actually get better impact and outcomes from the same project.
Thank you, Enos, for also shedding light on that perspective. My next question, just to even link to what Enos you've said, I'll welcome David. Even as we've been talking about digital tools, just to recap on what Enos is saying, how is Brighter improving comparability across different products, services, and portfolios?
Easy question. I mean, I wouldn't say that we have all of the data that helps different types of actors be able to compare across them. So I think with Brighter and with AgBase, you know, the first starting point that we really looked at was you know, funding level information. So really helping different types of funders be able to look at the trends associated with investment into different types of AgTech companies. And I do want to flag, when we say AgTech, we have a really broad definition, right? I think what we've seen over the last 5 years, at least, right, is, and Enos and I were just speaking about this, is as the funding landscape has evolved, as the instruments have evolved, there's been a lot more convergence between digital platforms, you know, more infrastructure or mini infrastructure asset heavy solutions, and more science-based solutions also emerging. So that can be everything from, you know, a Pula insurtech company to a sun culture solar irrigation solution to a, you know, biofertilizer type of solution on the science side. So I think what the funding data allows you to be able to see is what are the trends associated with the amount of capital flowing into different market types of solutions, as well as being able to see into different types of markets. And that allows us to see where different types of things are getting stuck. So a lot of the science-based solutions getting stuck at the early stage, a lot of the mini infrastructure asset heavy getting a lot of late stage debt capital from concessional funders, you know, a lot of digital platforms still getting funding from impact investors or VC. So we've really helped be able to look at that lens. But I think as Sheena and Ashley and many others can attribute, that only provides one part of the story, right? That helps you as a funder to say, where are the gaps? Where do I need to step in and support different solutions? Where are the gaps in instruments that we can focus on to help to support different types of businesses? What it hasn't allowed you to see, though, is comparison around necessarily the impact of those different models. Like digital platforms, for example, and SaaS companies, they can reach a lot of people very quickly, but perhaps the depth of impact isn't as transformative, say, as a mechanization solution for a smallholder farmer. So we haven't yet been able to help funders be able to make those comparisons. And that's part of what we're now looking to do with this impact toolkit. We've also not been able to help funders, you know, to look at the reach maybe of different solutions or the composition of the different types of farmers they're helping as well. So a lot of funding, for example, particularly commercial funding, has gone further downstream, more off farm, where there's better opportunities for monetization, where a lot of the high impact efforts you can have on small farmers are much more upstream as well. So we don't have that information yet in terms of the composition of reach, the type of individuals that are reached as well, including the gender of reach too. And then lastly, and probably the most complicated part of this, is the overhang of climate, right? And you know, that is something where you can actually have a big impact on climate without necessarily reaching a lot of people. So how do we add that layer into the discussion as well? And so I think while we've been very good at helping to understand, you know, these funding trends to help to identify gaps and opportunities for where more funding might be needed, where things might be getting stuck, I think what we're really trying to do with this toolkit and also the data collection efforts we're doing on the impact side is trying to broaden that to help people not just compare across funding, but what's the reach? You know, how do different types of solutions have impact? How do we consider climate and sustainability in this? And I think so far, Rita and the team have collected this information on about 100 businesses. We profile them in our Seeds of Impact study. We're still we'll be releasing, each quarter as we profile more and more companies to try to help funders to think through more of this, increase the visibility, and help people, ultimately align the right type of funding, the right type of instruments, the right type of funding mandate with solutions that best speak to what they're trying to do. And that's really where I see the next iteration of now AgBase really coming from. And I think, this toolkit is just part of that system and, a first point. But, if you're a founder and you have impact information, or a funder and you have impact information that you think can contribute to this or better complement the type of funding data we have as well, we'd love for you to reach out to us and connect with us. And we can think about different incentives, giving you access to the platform, various things like this to be able to build up that picture, because we think that will really help to better match funding with the right type of opportunities.
Thank you, David. Very many insights there. Even as I think the State of Investment report was released, there's a lot of debt funding happening now. And even in light of the different the funding shifts, I think it's so important, just to reiterate on what you've said, for us to be able to have standardized data that we can be able to also understand the learnings, what's happening in this sector, what's happening in this ecosystem, what worked, what didn't. And now allow me to throw it over to the audience. Please type in your questions. Please let us know if you have any questions. We're sorry, I think we are running a bit late, but please just feel free to share your questions in the chat, and we shall respond to them. So I think I see a question from Stella. Sheena, this is for Sheena. You raise a really important point about moving from attribution to contribution. In practice, how do you operationalize that internally, especially when funders or investors still expect clear attribution of results? Cool thought. How does that live in context? Sheena?
Should I just go straight? Yeah. So great. So I think for me, first, I think it's a really good question, and it's one that we sort of struggle with a lot. And I think you've just highlighted why it's difficult, right? Because this is what our funders, etc., expect. And I think step one is like start having this conversation now with our funders. So for example, we have a funding program, and we got, there was an independent evaluation, and they said, oh, what have you done? How many jobs have you created? I mean, this is a less than a year program, and I didn't fill out the form. I called them. I even called the donor, and I said, can we have a conversation about this? I can fill these numbers. I can show you, come to the field. But the reality is, you cannot create meaningful jobs in a year. If anybody says that, I completely disagree. And it's funny because I said, my husband works in the private sector, and he jokes about how we don't operate in the real world. He's like, for you, jobs, he's like, for us, jobs are a cost. He's like, you guys are treating them like a benefit. And then I said to him, yeah, but with more jobs, more people, etc. And to be fair, he's hired more jobs than many of the people that I know. So I think so one is we have to also have these hard conversations back and push back, because we know, that they have these tick box metrics. But if we don't, we'll keep doing it. And if, and I think this goes for investors similarly, right? Like, I think we need to push it back on them internally. Also, we have to sort of be very clear about what we've done, and then say, and what we've not done. So you can say, I did this, and then give the example of, however, if the weather had changed, this didn't happen. I think if we build in the narratives, so of the qualitative beyond just the numbers, it helps. It's not going to happen overnight. It is really, really difficult, especially, we all need the funding, we're all raising, etc. And that's why I think events, I think at school, this has been discussed. I think this has been a really good session, but there needs to be change, because otherwise this industry is just a tick boxing industry, and then we'll keep tick boxing. So it's very hard in practice. There's certain practical things, like I said, that can be done apart from pushing back, which is give qualitative stories so that your numbers don't look that bad, and invite them to go on the field, invite them to do these things, put your money where your mouth is. Stop looking at an easy database, try and understand. I mean, don't get me wrong, we're a tech company, data, numbers is all important. But we need to start measuring what's difficult to capture, because sometimes that's what's important. So, yeah.
Sorry, hashtag measure what's difficult, I think, and measure what is actually on the ground. I think I like that. She also brings in another question, Stella, on the idea that we tend to measure what's easy rather than what matters. What are 2 to 3 examples of metrics or signals you found more meaningful, even if they were hard or harder to capture?
Yeah, no, great. So the easy ones, I wish you'd ask me that question, which is, people trained and how many people attended and stuff. Those are easy. So actually what I found difficult to measure and what we found had a big was change in mindset, increased confidence. You wouldn't believe, right? But increased confidence makes such a difference. When we're working with our female farmers, at the moment we're working with these 5,000 poultry farmers, all our donors want to measure increase in income, right? Which is great. And we're going to do it, although I am pushing back even to quite a big donor. But people who know me know I do this. But what I found super interesting was confidence levels. And when you measure confidence levels, and it's so hard to do, and we just got it through just qualitative, through conversations, through this, that's made more of an impact in what they've delivered, how they've achieved, how they've thought. Because remember, you can do everything right, and you might not increase your income if there's a pest, or if there's a climate change, if there's no market to buy what you're selling, or whatever it is. But that confidence, with how they were speaking, how they were articulating themselves, what they thought of themselves, our biggest thing was the women who started referring to themselves not as poultry farmers, but as agri-businesses. And for me, that was like the biggest win. The second one, right, was like, for example, like I said, we work with youth agripreneurs, right? So I remember I went to an agripreneur and I was just chatting to her, this was after all the assessments, so we were just chatting. And she's like, Sheena, like, you wouldn't believe these elderly, she's a high school beauty dropout, by the way. And she goes to me, can you believe these elderly, these farmers, these wazees, they're calling me Mwalimu. Like the fact that they were giving her that respect, right? For her, I think that was way more important than any kind of other incentive and stuff. So how do you measure those things? But those are the kind of, things I think that are really, really hard to measure, but super important. But a great question. I don't have all the answers and I would love to work more. But these are just some I can give you, literally the most recent ones I've come across.
Thank you, Sheena. Thank you. Thank you for that. Any more questions in the chat? Okay. I don't think we have any questions. I think I can hand it over then to David to give closing remarks. But before I go, I'd just like to say thank you to you all for joining. We really appreciate, and thank you for taking the time. Yes, I think there's a comment here from Richard Santongo. He says, I totally agree with Enos and David on the issue of standardization. Sheena has a point on the issue of contextual framework. Within the FSD network, we regularly do what we call the FinScope survey as a way of ensuring alignment. Given the different contexts, how do we balance? Maybe I think I can give it to David as I hand over the mic for him to give closing remarks. Thank you all.
And we can thank everybody for staying for the hour and a half. Yeah, I mean, I think three things, really stand out for me, right? I think the first thing is actually building on what Richard said. Someone gave a presentation at one of the FinScope survey get-togethers that we had within the FSD network, where they said, first we shape our tools and then they shape us. And so I think just thinking about Sheena and thinking about Ashley is making sure that, what we measure shapes the right incentives for all of us. Ultimately, does it drive us to actually having the type of impact we want to within the AgTech space? And I think that's, that's a hard endeavor. And I think something that we continue to try to improve upon and evolve as well, making sure the tools that we have ultimately reflect that. I think the second thing, also speaking of what Richard said, is we want to make sure then that the cost of implementing those tools is not so high that it's limited only to a certain set of players. I think this is something that we've seen within the ag-based space, where those that can access certain types of survey instruments are often those that are best funded. And you know what, that almost reinforces this kind of concentration effect that we see. And so making sure that the tools we have aren't actually prohibitive to allowing people to ultimately fund and contribute to what matters most for us. And I think that's a really big thing of what we really want to look at with an ag base. But I know FinScope has looked at, I know many actors have looked at, which is how do we actually make data collection impact measurement more affordable, more accessible, in ways that still allows those companies to be able to speak to those indicators meaningfully and to be able to attract funding. So I think, developing the right tools, making sure the tools are really accessible, really affordable. And again, I'm not saying self-reporting is going to be the answer to that, but I think just thinking more innovatively around how we do that is a big part of what our partnership with Mercy Corps AgriFin under this grant looks like. And then I think the third thing is ultimately making sure that that these tools help to align and coordinate actors more effectively, not actually make it harder to collaborate. The most interesting part actually of the report that we released this year on the state of AgTech investment in Africa is that the number of funders per deal is at an all-time low. We're seeing less and less collaboration across funders into deals. And I think that's a really interesting indicator for us to track, because is that because things that matter to us are different? Is that because, for example, we have different perspectives on financial indicators that matter versus impact metrics? Because that's really going to be what catches us up. Is that because the commercial sector and the non-commercial sector are getting farther apart? Like, I think really making sure that the way we build these tools, the thing that we measure, don't actually push apart funders, but allow us to better coordinate and align at a time when Ines was saying concessional funding and commercial funding under more pressure. So I really think, as we leave this webinar, I think these are really the three things that I take away, and what I would love people to reach out and try to engage with us is, one, is this toolkit or the tools we're talking about, are we measuring the right type of things? We're never going to get it perfect. And I think there's always going to be a combination of the qualitative and the quantitative. The second thing is, are these tools accessible? Are they affordable? Can we make them available for companies that haven't necessarily raised, a $1 million or $10 million round as well? So it doesn't become prohibitive for them to be able to do that in the future, to reduce some of the concentration we see in the space. And then the third thing is, can we build tools that encourage and incentivize collaboration, both across DFIs and donors, like Ines was talking about, but also across the private and public sector as well, at a time when we need, we don't have a luxury for thinking any capital is bad right now. The scarcity that we see in the ecosystem is real, and we really need to make sure that we're incentivizing as many players to work together as possible. And I ultimately see that being one of the major things that we're trying to contribute and drive through this process. So if you're interested in learning more, engaging with us further, I think Michelle and Rita and Co will share various information with you. With Brighter, we have a big team in Kenya as well. Please reach out to them. We're based in Nigeria too. We've also recently expanded across emerging markets. So please, get in touch. Share your feedback with us. If you're interested in testing the toolkit, testing the platform, you just want to tell us, hey, you got this completely wrong, you're a bunch of idiots, we think you should do this differently, please reach out. All comments and feedback welcome. Thanks so much.
Thank you, David. As David has said, we shall be sharing a follow-up email just for the presentations that were shared. And also, if you haven't been able to self-report, please, we'll share the link to the AgBase toolkit so that you can be able to report. And as all the speakers have mentioned, we'll be able to see what's happening, gather evidence on what models are scaling, how are farmers being impacted, and not just, I think, the impact at numbers level. We're also trying to understand basically how it's affected and improved their livelihoods. So with that, I think we've come to the close of the webinar. I want to say thank you once again. Please look out for the materials we'll be sharing on email, and see you also in the subsequent webinars that we'll be convening for this. Thank you and have a good evening.